Foxconn Bloodrage, a name that slipped into history never to be heard again. A once legendary built from the ground up overclocking board, now a dusty relic from a past that failed to do what it was designed for. What happened? Today we look back at the X58 era, alongside a board that made headlines and that should have broken records, but somehow remained in the shadow and was forgotten by history. Foxconn Bloodrage. Now, to better understand this board, we have to look first at the company which designed it. Nowadays, when people hear Foxconn, most people think of CPU sockets that are made by them. But that is not what Foxconn used to be remembered for. Back in 2008, Foxconn used to be one of the big boys in the motherboard manufacturing business, featuring boards like the Foxconn Black Ops on the X58 chipset and the likes of the X58A. These boards were known for their overclocking prowess and their reliability. Apart from that, Foxconn was a more budget-oriented company, supplying motherboards for OEMs, but also for price-conscious consumers. It also built coolers, cases, and some entire nettops. Now, Foxconn builds cables, CPU sockets, and some more miscellaneous items. But let's get back to the board. Foxconn Bloodrage, a name to be reckoned with. After the success of a Black Ops X48 motherboard, Foxconn carried on to the next chipset with everything they learned so far. This is how the Foxconn Bloodrage came about, a motherboard that featured everything one might find useful and nothing more. If it hinders overclocking, then it is out of the question. The Foxconn Bloodrage was rumored to be the first LN2 overclocking motherboard, and so it was. Coming in the box with its own Northbridge LN2 pod plus a water cooling block, just to make sure that they covered every cooling need. Featuring a monster 14-phase VRM. For the CPU, the motherboard eclipsed most boards on the market at the time, beating in power delivery even the 16-phased, although doubled, of the Rampage to Extreme VRM. If the attention for details of the CPU VRM didn't impress you, then take a look at the crazy 3-phase VRM for the memory that even featured a heatsink that could easily cool the power delivery system of a modern CPU. Even the Northbridge features 3 phases. Wait, let me check. Actually, these are 2 phases. Even the Northbridge features 2 phases. Overkill is simply the only word that describes the VRM for this board. To put in perspective, this board continued to having the best VRM on X58 until the Rampage 3 Black Edition came. In late 2011, 3 years later, with dual BIOS, alongside a physical BIOS switch, postcode and integrated speaker, there will be no add-on necessary for this board. 4 PCIe slots positioned preferably for 2-way SLI and Crossfire assure that any GPU config will be properly seated. And of course we have to talk about the memory approach. Here we see a single DIMM per channel topology for maximum memory efficiency and speed. In 2008, when only 2GB DIMMs were available, people were mocking this board. But in time 8GB DIMMs were added in later BIOSes as they were developed, and now you can boot this motherboard with 24GB of DDR3, more than plenty for modern use. Quick side information, please keep in mind that Nehalem chips can't post 24GB of RAM for whatever reason, even with the latest BIOS. I tested some chips on a Rampage, the same chips on the Rampage 2 Extreme, and it works there, so there you go. Random information, I guess. Back to the main topic. Alongside the OS tools like the AEGIS panel linked in the description, please go into the description. I literally spent my life trying to find this stupid program. The board features a pretty intelligent BIOS, and it can handle some high overclocks for certain, recovering from very bad settings with ease. And also all the settings that you might want in the BIOS are right there. If you have QPI slow mode and all the voltages that you can imagine, but there is one small problem. And this is how we get to the last point. Why did the Bloodrage fail? There is a little setting at the very bottom of the overclocking tab, PCIe clock. Now, on a standard non-modded motherboard, if you try to boot at more than 103, you will get a very static postcode and exactly no boot. Thankfully, the motherboard knows how to recover and you will be soon back in the BIOS. But why? why is this setting so important on X58? Well, as most might know about X58, this is the last Intel chipset that featured a North bridge and that has a clock called bclk. Now, on normal settings you can push this to about 221 if you have a decent chip, and you should boot just fine. But for anything past 221, you need to both activate QPI slow mode and bump PCIe using this formula on screen right here. Still, why does this matter? As even an i7-920 using its 21 multiplier times 221 bclk yields you 4641 MHz, which is more than plenty for air and or even water daily usage. But for extreme overclocking, 221 is simply not enough. You usually need the 260-270 plus motherboard for top scores. So this is it? There's no way to push past 225 on this motherboard? Well, yes it is. And there are YouTube videos like this one from Lumi, showing right here on screen, that show you how to change the resistance from LCPLL to SBPLL for a greater overclocking range. And once you do that, this motherboard becomes exactly what it should have been from the very start. A truly overbuilt motherboard that proves to anyone on a budget that can still reach for the high scores provided they put in some effort and some love. That a forgotten manufacturer like Foxconn still can stir some rumble in an overclocker's heart, and after all these years can impress through sheer prowess of engineering excellence. This was the story of the Foxconn Bloodrage, the forgotten motherboard that was made to break records, but was almost swept into the darkness of history, sometimes remembered by the few that loved and cherished this great piece of hardware. I'm Hardware Shenanigans, and this is partially my face reveal. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Foxconn Bloodrage. Now, to better understand this flipping asshole of a board, oh my god, I messed it up so flipping bad. Back in the 2008 era, Foxconn used to be one of the big boys in the Back in 2008, Foxconn used to be one of the big boys in the manufacture.